So did you guys know that our typical search engines are only 4% of what we see on the web, which is like Google, Bing, Firefox? I'm going to be talking about some of the most popular websites on the dark web, so get ready because this is going to be intense. So here's a photo example just to give you guys an idea of what this looks like. At the top is the area that we do our research for school on, or stalk our exes, I don't know. And then 500 times larger than the surface web is the deep web. The deep web is filled with information that we cannot access, such as medical documents, iCloud, personal information. Like, I obviously can't Google what your family history or intake forms say, so that's where this is stored. And then the dark web holds the last 6%. This part of the internet was created by the US Navy in the 1990s, and it was made so spies could share info without being tracked. Well, then the government decided to release it to the public. And you need the specific software to go to it called Tor, which stands for the Onion Router. It hides your identity and gives you access to non-surface web pages. And on this section of the internet, you can do things like buy people's credit card information, get counterfeit money, participate in drug trafficking, hire hackers and hitmen, and way worse.
Am I the asshole for letting my daughter wear an expensive dress to my sister's house? Me, my husband, and our 15-year-old daughter, Georgia, went to my sister's place for lunch this past weekend. Georgia is very bright. She completed her exams early and is now studying more advanced material. She's a big fashionista, a lot more than I was at that age. She loves pretty clothes and outfits, and we're happy to get her as much as we can, provided she behaves well and keeps up the good grades. The lunch with my sister was fairly casual, but Georgia wore her new pink dress. My sister isn't as well off as we are, unfortunately, and she is raising 3 children on her own, and her job isn't a high-paying one. In the past, she asked me if Georgia could tone down her outfits when we come to visit because she doesn't want her kids being upset because they can't afford things like that. I do get my sister's point, but it's not down to me to police what Georgia wears. I've spoken to Georgia about it, but I left the final decision to her. Anyway, so we went for lunch, and Georgia ended up getting into an argument when my sister's 13-year-old daughter Lucy asked about the dress and where it was from. Georgia answered that it didn't matter because Lucy couldn't afford it anyway. We told Georgia to shut up as soon as the comment left her lips, but
Storytime about how my boyfriend cheated on me with a 17-year-old girl. So when summer started, I started working at this new job. And I had a really good connection with one of my coworkers. And he was 28 years old. So we started talking, but I would get mad at him a lot because he would ignore my messages asking to hang out. And on top of that, every time that we got done with work, we would all go sit and eat, and he would sit next to this one girl. And by the way, she was 17. And I could see them flirting all the time. Well, finally, once summer ended, she moved away. And then I felt like I had a real chance to start dating him. So we started hanging out a lot and hooking up a lot. After a few months, I started taking our relationship serious. Well, apparently not for him because there was this girl on his phone that he had been texting a lot. So weirdly enough, after that, I get a DM from the girl that he would always flirt with at work. And she asked me if I was dating him. And I said, yeah. And then she goes, oh, well, he's been texting me a lot. So then I blocked her and went and hooked up with one of his friends that night, like for part 2.
Story of the time I let a stranger drive me home. Disclaimer, do not do this. So at the time, I was either 15 or 16 and I worked at a shoe store. I became really close friends with the people that I worked with and they were a little bit older than me. And Uber was definitely a thing back then, but nobody ever used it. And a lot of my friends would use taxis, but they were pretty expensive, so I was not trying to get one. My parents were out of town, and my friend that was going to drive me home also worked at the mall, but she ended up going home sick, so she couldn't take me home anymore. So I start asking my coworkers if anybody would be able to take me home. But they all lived super far away from me in the opposite direction, so they all said no. The mall closed at 9:30, and we usually got out of work at 10. But I ended up sitting in the waiting area until 11 o'clock, just hoping that somebody would be able to pick me up. A few security guards came up to me and asked me why am I still in the mall, and I told them I'm waiting for a ride, so they let me stay. Mind you, I was sitting by an exit. So I see this cute guy walking towards the exit, and I talked to him a few times because he also works in the mall. He was like, "You're still here?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't have a ride." And he was like, "I got you."
Have you ever seen someone with extremely long hair? Well, a man from Yamata Village in Japan saw a woman with very long hair nearly down to her knees, but things were much stranger than they seemed. He was walking down a narrow street when this woman approached him, and as he walked closer, he realized that she'd been smiling the whole time. But this wasn't a normal, friendly smile. There was something strange about it that made him feel creeped out, but he smiled back anyways because he found her beautiful. This would be his last mistake. In that moment, her hair rose up and stuck to him. Strands of hair hooked onto his clothes. He ran as fast as he could, terrified. He got home quickly, locked the door, but couldn't fall asleep all night. The next morning, he felt a bit better, so he opened the door to try to go to work, but he saw that on the other side, his door was covered in scratches. He had run into Hariona, the long-haired woman from Japanese urban legend whose hair can turn into hooks. She's also known as a smiling woman, as she usually smiles at people from the shadows and also specifically targets men who smile back at her. Comment below what you would do if you ran into her, and follow to see more. Welcome to another part of Disturbing Myths You Didn't Know About. Once a young man heard a knock on his door. He opened it to find a distressed young woman who says she ran away from her abusive husband. He thought she was harmless, so he let her in his house. The next morning, the young man was on his daily walk when a priest came up to him and said that he was in danger. Feeling suspicious, he cut his walk off short and went home. As he approached his bedroom, he saw a demon with chalk white skin and white hair adding the final touches onto a sheet of painted skin spread on his bed. He hid behind the door, trying not to be seen. Then he saw her pulling the skin over her head and transform into the young woman. The young man went back to the priest, but he couldn't save him. One night, the demon snuck up on him and ate his heart before disappearing into the night. The fox demon from ancient Chinese mythology is a demon who disguises herself as a beautiful young woman. She lures men with her looks and powers of persuasion, then eats their hearts and livers to nourish her human disguise, which she has to paint her human features onto. Make sure to follow for the next part of Disturbing Myths.
Storytime on how I got caught sleeping with my teacher. A little backstory. I'm not the brightest girl. I was really struggling in middle school. I was the type that would ditch class, not go to school, and the days that I did go to school, I would always say that I was sick so the nurse would send me home. Well, my mom and dad caught on and they would make me go to school even if I was sick, because they didn't know if I was fake sick or if I was really sick. Well, it was almost the end of school year, and like I said, my grades were really, really low. Well, there was this one teacher that told me if I didn't pass that class, I would be repeating that grade. And obviously I didn't want that because I wanted to be with my friends. So I ended up asking that person how I could make it up to them. And at first that person said that they didn't know because it was too late. Well, whatever. A week after that, I received a text message. And it's an unknown number. Well, the text message said, "Hey, it's blank. Remember when you asked me how you could get your grades up? Well, I already know how you can do that, but let's talk in person." Obviously, I agreed to it. They gave me a place and a time to meet up. Running out of time, follow me for part 2.
This is why I don't tell anyone where I live. There was once a boy who asked his single father for a bedtime story, so the father told him. There was once a boy named Colby who made friends with another boy online called Helper23. On Colby's birthday, Helper23 wanted to give him a present in real life, so Colby gave him his home address, where he lives with his mom, his dad, and his little brother. But then Colby started to feel a bit weird about giving his address to a stranger online. The next night, he thought he had to tell his parents about it. He called out to his dad but got no reply, then found both his parents killed and a man wearing a dark hoodie holding a knife in the hallway. As Colby started to beg for his life, he hears his little brother crying in the next room. The intruder then strangles Colby and leaves the house with Colby's baby brother. The boy then looks up at his father and asks, "Why did the intruder take the baby?" To which his father just calmly smiled and said, "I've always wanted to be a father." Do you know the dark origins behind the fairy tales we all grew up hearing? In this series, I'm going to draw each fairy tale and tell you the original scary stories they were based on. Today, we're going to talk about Rapunzel. So in the original, Rapunzel's dad stole herbs from the witch's garden for his wife, and when he got caught, he agreed to give Rapunzel to the witch. Rapunzel is then trapped in the witch's tower, until one day a prince hears her singing in the tower, so she lets her hair down. This is the part we all grew up hearing about, but things take a much darker turn from here. The prince visits Rapunzel in secret, and the witch only finds out when Rapunzel gets pregnant and can't hide it anymore. In a fit of rage, the witch cuts Rapunzel's hair and uses it to lure the prince back into the tower. There, she throws him off and into a bush of thorns, which blinds him. After that, the prince ends up wandering around the country for years. But then Rapunzel, who's now a mother to twins, eventually finds him. When they reunite, Rapunzel's tears heal the prince's eyes, so I guess it kind of is a happy ending. Though it did take a lot of intense turns to get there. Let me know which fairy tale you want me to cover next, and follow if you want to see more.
Story of the time that we got caught sipping at Christian camp. So every other year during winter break, my parents made me go to this Christian camp. I quickly made friends with these 3 girls and 2 guys. The older we got, the more boring obviously it became, but we were all forced to go. So I'm pretty sure this was when I was maybe 16 or 17, and this year my friend was 22. So she had brought us a clear one and a dark one, and she brought them in water bottles. So we started exploring the entire camp. It was a pretty big camp. And we ended up finding this basement that had a pool table, a mini fridge, a TV. It was actually pretty cool. It was kind of like meant to be, you know what I mean? We're like, wow, we found this really cool chill spot. So the day we decided to sip was actually the last night of the camp. And my friend, who was 22, her parents ended up coming that last day because there was also meetings for adults. So anyway, we're all getting ready in her room, and she told her parents, don't go in my suitcase because it's really messy and I don't want you guys to judge me. Thinking that that would be not suspicious, but obviously it made her parents suspicious. And that same day, we had this really
Welcome back to another Toxic Best Friend story time. A little background information. I was friends with this girl since elementary school, and we had a really good friendship until we got into high school. Like, we always got along, never fought over boys. Well, during our freshman year, this new boy started at our school. Well, I started talking to him. And after a month of still talking to him, my best friend goes, I don't think you should talk to him. He talks to a lot of girls. And because she was my best friend, I didn't think she would lie about that. I believed her and I stopped talking to him. Well, that weekend, I went over her house. And when I walked in her room, she goes, oh, say hi. And who else is on the phone but the boy she told me not to talk to? So after they got off the phone, I was like, let me guess, you told me to stop talking to him because you liked him. And she goes, yeah, I just knew that if I told you I liked him, you wouldn't stop talking to him. So that night, we went to a party, and he was there. And things started to go south, like for part 2.
Storytime of how I caught my dad and my stepdad sleeping together. So a little background information, my mom and my real dad got a divorce when I was around 4. So like the typical, on the weekdays I'd be at my mom, and on the weekends I'd be at my dad's. Then when I was around age 6, my mom married my stepdad. And since they got married at such a young age, I called my stepdad dad and my real dad dad. This story ends up with a lot of confusion and chaos, so just get ready for that. So everything started to get a little weird when my stepdad went to go drop me off at my dad's house one day. My stepdad actually went into my dad's house and they talked for about like 5 hours. You see, I went to sleep and then the next morning my stepdad and my dad were both making me breakfast. And then I overheard my stepdad on the phone with my mom saying that he had an overnight shift. So I didn't say anything because every time I tell my mom something, she ends up believing my stepdad anyways. Because I mean, my stepdad's always right? Anyways, the next time that he dropped me off, my stepdad ended up staying again. Then I ended up walking into my dad's room, seeing both of their pants off. I'm running out of time, like for part 2.